Hello, boys and girls. Today you're going to be working on 7.7. The essential question for this lesson is, how do you use the quadrilateral hierarchy to give different names for the same figure? Hierarchy. You've been working on that the last two lessons in 7.5 and 7.6, so you should have a very good idea about that. And different names for the same figure? Let's find out what we're going to do. Let's get started. Here we are with our mental math. We have 3 problems. I'd like for you to think about these a little bit. Some of you may need to use scrap paper to estimate here, but what we're going to do is we're going to work on each one of them and figure out where does the decimal go. And the nice part about this is that we've already given you the answer. You just have to figure out where does that decimal actually fit in. So for the first example here, I have 98.7 or 98 and 7/10 divided by 9 and 4/10. So I'm going to round or make that estimate. 98 and 7/10 is going to get rounded to 100. And I'm going to divide that by 9.4, or in this case 10. So when I do that and I go 10 into 100, that goes 10 times. So based upon that, where's my decimal going to go? If you said right there in between the 0 and the 5, you are correct. Our second problem is 10 and 8/10 divided by 2 and 25/100. So when I estimate there, I'm going to estimate this 10.8 to stay at 10. My 2.25 I'm going to keep at 2. So I know that 2 goes into 10 5 times. So knowing that my answer for my estimate is 5, my decimal place is going to go in between the 4 and the 8. My last example on this page, you see the problem there. So my estimate for here is going to go to 200. And I'm going to divide that. To make this a little bit easier, I'm going to divide it by 2. And the reason I'm going to divide it by 2 is because I know that 2 goes into 200, a little bit easier than 3. And it's not going to really change my answer. So I know that 2 goes into 200 100 times. So therefore, I've got to come up with something that's close to 100. Where should that decimal go? If I put it in between the 8 and the 7, that's going to give me 600. That's not really close to 100, but if I put it in between the 2 and the 8, that's really close to 100, or as close as I'm going to get to 100, so therefore my answer is 62 and 875 thousandths. Last 2 mental math problems I'm seeing in front of you. So take a second and think about these 2. Okay, for this first one here, I'm going to round to 27. And for 8 and 65/100, I'm going to round up to 9, because 9 goes into 27. So when I do 9 into 27, that's 3 times. So knowing that, where's my decimal going to go? Okay, if you said right in between the 3 and the 2, you are correct. And my last problem here, I have 8, so I'm going to round that to 9. And I'm going to round this 75/100 to 1. So when I do that, I get 9. 1 goes into 9 times. So based upon that, my estimate is going to be close. So I'm going to put it in between the 1 and the 6. So here's a tough question for you. What is this shape called? List as many names for it as you can. There are actually 4 names that we can call this shape. The first one is a quadrilateral, second one is a trapezoid, third is a parallelogram, and the fourth and final one, which most of you probably had, is a rectangle. In the previous lesson, you filled out the sentence that sounded something like this. All rectangles are quadrilaterals, but not all quadrilaterals are rectangles. Or, all rectangles are trapezoids, but not all trapezoids are rectangles. Third, all rectangles are parallelograms, but not all parallelograms are rectangles. And last but not least, thinking about that shape that we just talked about and came up with 4 different names, and looking at page 251 from yesterday's lesson, we can start all the way at the top where we see quadrilaterals. And if we follow this arrow here down to trapezoids, that was one of our other shapes. We named that shape. If I go down and follow this arrow down from trapezoids, I also have parallelograms, which was the 3rd name. And if I move a little bit farther down, I also have that last name, that basic name of a rectangle. Let's think about these shapes for a second, and subcategories and attributes. All right, let's take a look at the example of a rectangle. Rectangle is a subcategory of the one above it, parallelogram. So every rectangle has all the attributes or properties of a parallelogram. That means also every rectangle is also a parallelogram. The same relationship exists between rectangles and trapezoids, and rectangles and quadrangles. So if you think about that, thinking about this again, quadrilateral starting at the top follows this down to trapezoids, down to parallelograms, and then from parallelograms we have down here rectangles. Using this quadrilateral hierarchy, I'd like for you to come up with a list of all the names for this current shape. Here are the names I came up with: quadrilateral, kite, trapezoid, parallelogram, and rhombus. Some of you might not have come up with all those names. So let's take a look at the hierarchy and figure out how we did this. So we know we're going to start at the top with the quadrilateral. And many of you might have gone down to the kite. And from the kite, you could follow this all the way down to this arrow down here. So from kite all the way down to rhombus. And that's where you're going to basically stop. So you might have those names. But let's look at the other path. Notice that the quadrilateral also has an arrow that goes over here to a trapezoid. So this could also be called a trapezoid. And then I can come down here a little bit farther and go with parallelogram. And then from the parallelogram, notice it branches off two ways. So this time I'm going to branch off and I'm going to come back over here to the rhombus. So if you didn't get all those names, you have to kind of be careful in that this hierarchy can go two different ways. Today we're going to play a game to practice finding names for quadrilaterals. Here's page 320 in your SRB. This game we're going to be playing today is called Property Pandemonium. Here you will see the materials that you will be needing and how many people will be playing the game. So you will have to make sure that you have one Property Pandemonium card deck. And that is in the back of your math journal. It's on activity sheet 20. You will need to cut that out, and you will notice that there's going to be two piles of cards that you're going to be putting into two different piles. One pile is going to say a quadrilateral card, and the other one is going to be a property card. You're also going to need a Property Pandemonium record sheet, which looks like this. Here's the Property Pandemonium record sheet, which you and your partner will find outside in the bin, outside of Mr. Whitmer and Mrs. Stan's room. Now that you have the materials for the game, I'm going to simply read the directions with you and then explain how it works. You're going to place the property cards and quadrilateral cards face down in separate piles. You're going to take turns. When it's your turn, you're going to draw one property card and one quadrilateral card. You're going to record that information on that Property Pandemonium record sheet. If you draw a wild card, you may choose a property or a quadrilateral of your choice. On the record sheet, draw an example of the quadrilateral given on your quadrilateral card that has the property or properties listed on your property card. You may look at the quadrilateral hierarchy to help you. This was page 251, which we had used earlier in this lesson or in this video. You're going to list all the other names you were given the quadrilateral you drew into the additional names column. Show your drawing and names to your partner. If your partner can write additional names for your quadrilateral, add them to your record sheet. Your score for the round is the number of additional names recorded. You're going to play 3 rounds. The player with the fewest points wins. Okay, so Nico draws the 4 right angles property card and the trapezoid quadrilateral card. So you can see he wrote it down the properties and he wrote down the quadrilateral. He gave the drawing, and then his additional names were quadrilateral, rectangle, and parallelogram. Based upon these extra additional names, this is where his 3 points comes from. These sheets can be found out in the crate in between Mrs. Stam and Mr. Whitmer's room. They will be found underneath the 7-7 section of the binder. Please make sure you grab one of these sheets for you and your partner. And with that being said, you need to make sure that you have a partner that is also on this lesson, 7.7. So be sure you pick somebody that you know you'll be responsible playing with and that you'll be able to handle being with throughout the game. Okay, you can see that I have my two piles of cards. I'm going to take one from each pile and flip it over. So my property card says 2 pairs of parallel sides. And my quadrilateral card says that I have a square. So with those cards, I'm going to write 2 parallel sides in the property pile. Excuse my writing. And in my quadrilateral card, I'm going to write a square. Now in the drawing section, I need to draw a square. So there's my square. And now, thinking about additional names for something that has 2 parallel sides is a square, I need to come up with additional names. This is where I'm going to use page 251 to help me. I see that a square is all the way at the bottom of the quadrilateral hierarchy. But I know anything that is above it is also going to have additional names. So I'm thinking that a rhombus could be here. So I can write rhombus here. I'm going to do it in shorthand. I also know if I go up top a little bit, or I can move over, I have a parallelogram. So those are 2 additional names that I have. Now it's my partner's turn to see if he or she can name any additional names that go with it. My partner comes up with the kite, so he or she's going to put that on mine. So I get 3 points for that round. It's my partner's turn now to do the same thing. Pick a property card, pick a quadrilateral card, except he or she is going to write it down on their side of their board down here. You're going to play a total of 3 rounds altogether. When you are finished, make sure you hand the cards to Mr. Whitmer or Mrs. Stam so that they can be used for future games. When you are finished playing the game with your partner, you're going to go back to your math journal and work on page 253, which is mixed number multiplication, and then math boxes on page 254. Finish those 2 pages and then you head back out to the crate one last time for the day and work on 7.7 home link. Good luck and have a great rest of the day.